Okay, let's talk about TikTok, specifically a brief history of TikTok and why and how churches, pastors, people of faith might want to pay attention to this. So we're going to talk about the demographics, the growth, the general things, and then really go through a big history of the platform so you can just know a bit more about this thing called TikTok and maybe think through ways that pastors, church leaders, faith leaders should engage with it, and particularly the way that short-form vertical video content is just ubiquitous with social internet right now. You see it not just on TikTok, but it's obviously on Instagram, Facebook Reels, YouTube Shorts, the same content type with nearly the same time constraints. You got a little more wiggle room on some of those platforms. YouTube is the tightest, where it makes you be 60 seconds. We'll talk about YouTube another time. But TikTok, it has become a way of thinking about content that you can really employ everywhere. And we'll talk about that whole thing as we go. So first, let's start with a little bit about TikTok. Now we're going to look here at the user growth they've seen. You can see it's been consistently up and to the right. Very, very rapid growth from here in 2018 up to 2024. So pretty much through when I'm recording this now, here in September of 2024. So a very solid, consistent growth. Even the countries that are most using this platform, United States, has a lot of users on it, but then it's all around the world as well. We'll see more about that from the origin of it and how that came to be. But you see a lot of people using this platform. I think this one's interesting. Who's using it? The age of the users. Now, this doesn't always mean creators, because TikTok you can just watch content, but you can also make content. It's interesting. But here you have a breakdown of who is most on the platform. So it definitely skews younger, where platforms like Facebook skew the opposite almost. This one is kind of inverting that, and you have 13 to 17 and 18 to 24, 25 to 34 making the overwhelming majority. Those three demographics alone are what? 70% of the users. So why should churches think about TikTok? Well, are you interested in reaching people between the ages of 13 and 35? This could be a space to think about just showing up, because this is where they're showing up. There's a lot of how you go about that. You don't want to just be creepy grown up at the playground, but how do you just authentically engage in these spaces? So we'll get to that more as well. TikTok is also a space that has 1 million creators. 1 million creators are making stuff on this. That's 4% of total users. So, whoa, you might have thought, well, that's a big number. It's actually a small minority of the total users. That means most people on TikTok are not creating content regularly, but they are engaging content. They are watching and engaging and seeing what's going on. So this is just interesting to be aware of how people use it. Most people of all those stats we looked at, that user growth, are just watching. It's a content source for them, not a content creation avenue. So maybe you as a pastor, faith leader, using it to make stuff is a way you can engage people. Now, people on average spend 55.8 minutes a day on TikTok. Nearly an hour, which is a whole lot we can get into on how much of our life is spent staring at screens and what it's doing to our posture and all that. But nearly an hour a day on average. And people are checking the app 8 times a day. So if you need a reason to think about should churches, faith leaders be on TikTok, I think some of this is the case for it. People are there an hour a day, checking it 8 times a day. Imagine if you had someone walking into your church an hour a day or walking in past it 8 times a day. You might want to think about some creative signs or ways to engage people in that context. Not to say that everyone on TikTok is going to see everything you post. That's not how the internet works, but there is a overwhelming mass of people who are spending time in this space. And are we even engaging it, or are we just running because of whatever rumors we heard? Or there's valid reasons not to be on these platforms, but I think just a lot of it comes down to not knowing what we need to know. So we'll get into some of that as well. Let's now shift though away from these big numbers to a timeline. So here is our brief history of TikTok. Brings us back. March 2012, a company called ByteDance is founded. Chinese company. Still in existence today. You might have heard of the name because of some of the lawsuits happening between the United States and TikTok. We'll get into that as we get closer to where we are now. But here's where it all begins. ByteDance is founded. 2014, Musical.ly is founded. Now, these are two different companies at the time, worth being aware of that. Musical.ly starts as this thing that kind of is a way to lip sync to music videos. That's the idea. You can play it and you can do different transitions and scenes and stuff. I heard about it from two sources, both of them very reputable when it comes to what people are into, especially young people. Gary Vaynerchuk is a marketer, CEO, business person. He talked about Musical.ly back in 2014, 15 a lot. And then my niece, one Christmas, I was home, saw my family, and asked, hey, what apps are you into these days? And she's like, there's this one called Musical.ly. So I downloaded it and we made some videos. Then I forgot about it until TikTok emerged. And I'm like, oh, didn't this used to be? So we'll get there. We'll get there. These are two separate things. Now, September 2016, a couple years later, ByteDance launched an app called Ami. I don't know. It doesn't exist anymore. That then shifted to be Douyin, which still exists today. That's the logo, which looks very familiar. Douyin still exists as a separate app. It's not TikTok. It's a separate experience, but it essentially is TikTok. In China, this is the TikTok experience, and it does a whole lot more than the TikTok we're used to on our phones. Now, September 2017, TikTok created a global version of Douyin. November 2017, we're still in that same time frame, ByteDance acquires Musical.ly for $1 billion, which is a big number. It's a number we've seen in other acquisitions. Instagram was $1 billion acquisition, all those kinds of things. But here, ByteDance has developed a thing called Douyin. They made their global version of it, TikTok, and now ByteDance. So there's Douyin for Chinese audiences, there's TikTok for global audiences, and then just 2 months later, they acquire Musical.ly. You can see where this is going, right? 2018, Musical.ly content and users merge with TikTok. There we go. We've got it all now. This is really the origin of the TikTok we know today. August 2018 is when these worlds collide, and now we have it. February 2019. So this is still, put yourself on a map here. 2019. Remember where you were? That's when Old Town Road by Lil Nas X debuted on TikTok. This is what's set a huge trend now where so much music discovery happens through TikTok and other short form vertical video apps, but TikTok is still a huge place for content to be discovered. February 8, 2019, this definitely was a tipping point for TikTok. Also in 2019 is the year that I was skeptical of TikTok. I was like, what is this thing? Now, I was at a conference called South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. I was there to learn about influencer marketing engagement and social nonprofits and creativity. And then TikTok was everywhere. They were majorly advertising. I'm like, that thing, wasn't that Musical.ly? I don't think that's gonna. I was obviously wrong. That was a tipping point for TikTok in so many ways. Now, July 2020, so we're still same time frame, July 2020, very specific point in global existence, but American existence as well. We can think of, it's really when we get the Trump versus TikTok moments happening. Donald Trump had a lot to say. Some of his comments about TikTok were definitely charged with a racial bias in the ways he blamed or accused China of mishandling the COVID-19 pandemic. So he had a lot going on to correlate the two and began a very clear Trump versus TikTok movement. Now, August 2020, still very early peak pandemic, Instagram Reels. This is an interesting thing to put in the history of TikTok because where TikTok had been pioneering in some ways this vertical short form video content, hold your phone like this and the video just fills the screen. Instagram Reels says, hey, that's a great idea. Let's make our own version of it. It's virtually the same thing, but just on Instagram. And then, if that wasn't enough, that's August 2020. The next month, September 2020, YouTube Shorts. We just got vertical video content everywhere. So this is an interesting moment to just pause on because this is really when we see for the first time the same content type landing across all social platforms. It used to be, Instagram needed squares and Facebook wants wide and Twitter needs short, like brevity of text and mainly text, and they all play interesting with links. Now we see the same vertical short form content that you can bloop, 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 drop it into all the different places. It was January 2021, a smidge after YouTube Shorts launch, when all of this kind of was out, that I made a shift at Riverside and I said, let's experiment with some short form vertical video content because now for the first time I can make one creative and publish it in multiple places. So I can do the work here and really see how distribution happens? What sort of engagement do we get? And it's just an experiment. Like, what's going to happen? I don't know. You're not going to know. Is the spaghetti going to stick? I can, do all sorts of tests, but you got to just throw it against the wall. Once in a while you can read a book on how to swim, but you got to just jump in and see how it feels. So we jumped in. We started by making some original content. We started repurposing sermons, which is something I think every church should be doing, because you are standing up and talking for 15 minutes or longer, some of you, every single week. So why not take that and repurpose it, not just as watch the whole 15-minute thing, because we don't always have the attention span for that, but can you find ways to take from that 15 to 45 second clips that can then be published on these places? That's one thing we began doing, taking sermon shorts. You can find them manually in your editor. There's platforms and programs that can help you with this. Opus.ai is a great one that we still use at Riverside every week. It helps kind of identify what could be good clips and does the captioning. Great platforms. There's a lot of others out there too. But we started doing that at Riverside. Started taking sermon clips, taking things, and we were getting to June, so my timeline is skewed here. Just stick with me. June 2021, we began exploring short form content. We've been doing it since January, so we're 6 months into this experiment. We're seeing, steady-ish things happening, people engaging stuff, and we're really playing with TikTok and publishing elsewhere as well. But we're saying, what could happen here? And we're seeing a lot of good results. June, I started looking back at old Pride Month sermons that we'd had in Riverside's history, and I found some phenomenal ones, and I pulled clips from them and had them dropping all month long. And then I had one from Bishop Yvette Flunder, who, if you know Bishop Flunder, you already know she's amazing. And she had this sermon where it was incredibly... Here, can I find the clip? Let's watch the clip.
To my closeted LGBT folks in the room. Closets, especially church closets, are unfit for human growth and habitation. Closets are musty, they have no windows. They are dark, they are created for storage. They're not there for living people. I want to welcome you to the light, and I encourage you to break out, bust out, come out, come out, come out, come out. There's fresh air over here, come out. We're waiting for you. We got some good things to share with you. Come on out of there. There's a whole community that will love you.
Yeah, that one. Incredibly powerful, obviously. And that one, within a matter of weeks, skyrocketed our TikTok account from, a couple hundred followers to a couple thousand followers to over 10,000 followers. And we haven't had that kind of spike since. We've seen some consistent growth, but it made me think, okay, there's something here. There's the need now to have an intentional strategy when suddenly, after 6 months of experimenting and one blip of, virality, we saw TikTok being Riverside's most followed social platform. Our newest one, and suddenly our biggest one. Now, a word on audience size, because just because you have a lot of followers on social media doesn't mean all those followers see what you're posting. That is the contrast from the social graph to the interest graph. Once upon a time, we used to go on social media and see what we wanted to see, because I chose to follow people or companies or brands or whatever, and I would see all their content, often in chronological order. And I would just scroll, see what I missed. Oh, look, pictures. Oh, look, things. Oh, look, a new whatever. Now we have the interest graph, where the platforms are giving you content that the platform thinks you will be interested in. The algorithms. So the algorithm is deciding you might like this. You might want to see this. And their purpose in that is to keep you on their platform, and at times to really help you discover things you didn't know you would have wanted to discover. Instagram, back to Instagram, is very good at this. Even the way they break down their app, the For You page. FYP. Now, once upon a time, you used to start on the FYP, the For You page. Now they've kind of shifted that, where you can have your friends, your followers, and your For You page. But either way, they all function with this interest graph in mind. Even on friends, which on TikTok means the people that you follow who also follow you, so it's a mutual relationship, it's not going to show you everything in chronological order. It's going to still curate it based on who you interact with most, who it thinks you want to interact with. Who you follow, same thing. And then the For You page is where it's just like, we think you're into this. And this is where Instagram is very particular and powerful in what it does. It gets to know you maybe even better sometimes than you know yourself. You discover things like, oh, I am into this, or this is a part of who I am. And everyone's For You page is going to look different. It all reflects your interests and your behaviors on the platform, the kinds of content you spend more time watching, that you watch again, that you like, that you comment. It's kind of paying attention to all that big data, and it's serving up what it thinks you will like best. This is also why if, Congress people or pastors say TikTok, that's just an app that all I see on it are, scantily clad young women dancing. That tells you more about that person than it does about the app. Because yeah, that exists, that's on the internet everywhere, but it doesn't show up on your page unless you've been interacting with it. My For You page is a lot of running content. I'm wearing my running stuff right now because I engage with running stuff. It's a lot of progressive spirituality because that's the stuff I make and engage with. So the stuff you engage with more is what you're going to have given to you from the algorithms. How did we get onto this? Talking about the history of TikTok. Algorithms. Lots going on. Okay, back to the timeline. September 2020, YouTube Shorts. Now we have all three platforms playing these algorithm games with vertical short form video content. February 2021, Biden postpones the legal case that Trump had brought against TikTok. Okay, interesting. Remember Trump hated TikTok? To be honest, that's when I was first interested in it again. I was like, if he doesn't like it, I think I might. Biden postpones the legal case. Get ready for a plot twist in a little bit here. April 2022, the unofficial Bridgerton musical wins a Grammy? What? This was a video series that came on TikTok. Here, let's watch this one. Ready?
Okay, but what if Bridgerton was a musical? What a beautiful party. I'm looking up at the ceiling a lot. The chandelier is so sparkly. You never said sorry, guess you forgot. Or maybe you're not sorry at all. What a beautiful evening. I want to know just what the hell are you drinking? Stoic, emotionless over us all so quickly. What am I missing? I can't even drink champagne. No, without seeing your face. Am I the one to blame? We're dancing in the same room and you're an ocean away. Right?
What'd you think? Isn't it amazing? Google it. There's a whole history. You can find them on YouTube and TikTok and all the places. Really, really fascinating stuff. And then December 2022, there are some major security concerns about TikTok. Okay, we got stuff to pay attention to here. Now, February 2023, government workers in the United States are not allowed to use TikTok. So we got some of that going on again. The Trump versus TikTok. Biden postponed it. It's making its way back into the air again. And then here's a picture many of you might remember, March 2023. So think about where we are in time now. March 2023, a lot of places have reopened mid-pandemic. We can't really say post-pandemic. It's still with us. But there was a 6-hour congressional hearing with the CEO of TikTok. Those are always interesting to watch. There was the same thing that happened, when Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg went to Congress, to Washington. Always an interesting time. Now, April 2024, ban or sell bill is passed and signed. Whew. Okay, this is interesting because Trump versus TikTok, Biden postpones it, security concerns, congressional hearings, the bill is passed. Now, this puts a particular deadline that TikTok needs to sell itself from ByteDance and no longer be a Chinese company, or else the United States will not use it. Why would TikTok care? Remember, United States is the largest user base of TikTok. Not Douyin, that's a different experience, different platform, but of TikTok. So Biden signed the bill, and it has a timeline. I think it's set for January 2025. We'll get to that in a minute, but we'll see what happens with it as we get closer to time. So yeah, the ban or sell bill, it passed. It's a thing. TikTok might be going away. So should churches still be using it? Well, yes, because people are still there. You still go to the coffee shop or the bar, even if they're closing in 2 months, because people are still showing up. Incarnational ministry means being where the people are. Where are they? Okay, here we go. May 2024, ByteDance sues the U.S. government. So we have a little free speech controversy going on. April 2024, Kamala Harris joins TikTok. Pretty recent. There's a lot going on with Kamala Harris in August 2024, but just always interesting when the presidents who are banning the platform then join the platform. So we'll see what happens post-election. And then January 2025, we'll see. This is really when it is scheduled to shift significantly. Yeah. Now, a few things I mentioned throughout. Let's just make sure we have some vernacular about TikTok. The FYP is the For You page. This is what I was saying earlier about TikTok's primary way of just serving up content it thinks you'll be interested in. You can have your friends, the people you mutually follow and follow back. You can have your followers, the people you choose to follow who don't follow you back. Like I follow the Washington Post, but Dave doesn't follow me back. Come on, Dave. And then your For You page is where it's giving you things that it thinks you might like. And like I said, that's when we move from the social graph to the interest graph. The social graph was where you would see the content from the people you follow. The interest graph is where you see the content based on what you've previously engaged with. So what impacts the algorithm? Let's talk about that. User activity, subject matter, location and language, the audio. Not interested. So your user activity, the kind of stuff you're playing with and interacting with, the subject matter, if you interact with a lot of running content, you're going to then be given more running content. Location and language, meaning I'm going to mainly see stuff in English and in the United States. Even sometimes locally to where I currently live in Michigan. But your content will have some of those connections to you, so you're given things that you can understand some context with. And then the audio, that's kind of the popular audios you can engage with, the different trending audio sounds. If you're noticing one a lot or engaging with it, it might give you more that use that audio. And then not interested is you can always tell the app that you're not interested in a video, and then it will take that as a signal to stop sending you that content type, because the goal of these platforms is to keep you on the platform. I mean, we like to think it's to give us the best user experience, but at the end of the day, they just want us on there so they can sell more ads to make more money. Capitalism. So what doesn't impact the algorithm? A few things. How many followers you have. You can have 2 or 2,000 and your videos can still be seen really widely. And how many high-performing videos you have does not impact it. You could have 100, 100, 100, 100 views and then suddenly get 100,000 views. Now, people with larger followings, that generally is a trend that says more people are engaged with them, so more people are following them, so their numbers might generally be higher. But I just think it's worth looking at kind of the ratio of what's their average and then what's their breakout. And you're going to see probably a similar kind of range proportionate to that. So that's really to say, don't worry if you're not getting a lot of followers or a lot of views. All these content creation things is you're running the marathon. Hey, more running references. You're not doing a sprint. You got to be ready to do this for a while. Remember my Riverside life? 6 months of this before we even saw a thing that spiked. And we haven't replicated that, but we haven't given up because we recognize the value of this space. Okay. A little bit on how to use TikTok, just so you can walk away having some information. First, you swipe and you tap. You watch content and you make content. This is not going to be the total overview on how to use TikTok. For that, I recommend youtube.com/disorganized.religion. My friend Sarah Tevis Towns, she's on TikTok. She also has a YouTube channel where she has made some great videos walking through how to start on TikTok. But really, it's as simple as swipe and tap, just like a phone, and you can really just spend your time watching content. The first step in any new context is that ethnographic research. Where am I? What's going on? How do we even behave in this space? Get to know the contextual norms. And then make some stuff. Try it out. Open the phone and hit the button and push the big red button and make a thing. Now, when you're making content, what should you do? Here are some things to try. Number 1, focus on the first 3 seconds. Wait, what? Yeah, 3 seconds right at the beginning, because this is an ecosystem where you're not choosing which video to watch from a dozen options, like YouTube videos where you're like, ooh, which video do I want to click on or tap based on title and thumbnail. It's a whole thing. Here, it's this like swipe. It's not, do I want to start watching it? It's, do I want to keep watching it? The video just comes to you, and the question is, am I going to linger or am I going to swipe past it? So the first 3 seconds are essential because that's really the moment of getting someone's attention. So that's important, so don't start with a long silence with your logo coming in because I'm already swiping by. Don't think about the words you're using. What's the first sentence? How is it connecting and engaging? Just these are good things in all communication, but particularly on a platform where short form vertical video content and our attention span is so brief. Another thing you can do is focus on your niche. Basically, what area do you want to lean into? What is it that you're going to make stuff about? That's just helpful for the platform to know you make stuff about this. So if people like that, we can give them more of you and they're going to like more of it. Now, as churches, pastors, faith leaders, we probably have that kind of figured out. We can be talking about faith, spirituality, social justice, progressive theology, all that good stuff. And that's a good place to go. On my personal TikTok account, it's RevJimRuns. I'm trying to integrate running and theology. So I have some videos that are about running, some videos that are about progressive theology, often done while I'm running. So I'm trying to bring together these two worlds of bringing progressive theology to the running community and bringing running to the church community. So it's an experiment. I'm not TikTok famous, not Hank Green or anything, but it gives me some focus. It gives me a lane and some parameters to play in. Another thing is to focus on trends. As you're exploring the context, getting to know the surrounding, you'll notice some people doing similar things. There was this, the brat dance, this Apple thing, all this, there's trends that happen and, feeling mindful, feeling demure, all the things that pop up. TikTok is often where trends begin and then they make their way over to other short form platforms. I think that gap is narrowing. It used to be the trend on TikTok, and then 6 months later it'd show up on Reels. I think it's a little closer now because these platforms are all kind of merging in some psychologies. But I think you can focus on what is trending and then what's your kind of take on that. How can you play with that? I mean, I think the very mindful, very demure was one that churches probably could have been more on top of because we do a lot of like prayer and contemplation. There was a lot of stuff. So focus on trends. Another is to experiment with new features. Platforms like it when you play with their new features because they're trying it out. So often when there's a new feature rolling out, if you try it out, it's going to serve that content up to new audiences because they want to see how their new feature's working. So everyone's testing all the time. But just a thing to be aware of that if something new pops up, try it out. TikTok made a move where they let you make longer videos. Make some longer videos. See what happens. Worst that happens is it gets the same amount of views as always. Best, it gets a whole lot of views and you discover a new audience and people connect with you. So experiment. Engage with others in your niche. So who else is making stuff like you? Be a part of a community. Don't just be, off by yourself on a soapbox with a megaphone, but actually have a conversation. And this one might be interesting, but, include captions. Maybe you didn't think of that. Most people watch, I don't know the number. A lot of people, I watch most of the content on mute, which means if there are no captions, I'm going to skip it because I'm rocking a baby or something, or I'm putting a kid to bed or whatever my life is, or I don't know. I will more likely watch the video if it has captions than doesn't. And it's also accessibility. Some people just don't have the ability to hear. So making it more accessible is a win for everybody. A lot of these platforms allow you to caption the video from within it. You don't have to do that externally or anything. You can just hit the button and it auto-generates them and you can edit them and manipulate them. But just be intentional. It's an extra step, but it's essential just for the overall user experience. And also, don't delete your old content. Just because it's from a year ago, whatever, 5 years ago, there's still spaces where old stuff resurfaces. Now, you might have some reasons to delete old content for other purposes, but don't just be like, gotta clean it out because it's whatever. It's like, it's good to keep. It still is part of your story and people can engage and connect with it. So those are generally some essential steps to take. Now, in general, what works on TikTok and all platforms? A couple things. Authenticity, creativity, relevance. Is the content you're making authentic to you? Is it something that comes out of who you are? Is there an element of creativity to it? It's more than just, monotone, boring background talking. Hopefully this isn't a boring background. Can it have something creative added to it? And is it relevant? Does it speak to the world we're in today? A group I work with began playing with some short form content experiments last spring during Lent. And on Ash Wednesday, we had a couple videos about Ash Wednesday that reached a whole lot of people because of the particularity of Ash Wednesday. Try to drop that, in the middle of August, probably not as relevant. So you're not trying to be relevant for the sake of relevance, but just like what conversation are people having? What are people looking for? When are people talking about things? And don't try to change the subject if everyone's over here. And at the same time, what's happening in the world and the news? And can you offer your take on this? Offer your authentic, creative, relevant perspective. I mean, Karl Barth talked about preaching with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. Okay, substitute newspaper for this device. There you go. Yeah. Now, lastly, and just briefly, followers versus community. They're not the same. What is your goal? Are you just setting out to grow your followers, or are you trying to cultivate a community? Now, followers are not bad. There's not like a, oh my goodness, wrong. It's inevitable in some senses, but what does it mean to intentionally think about a community? Whether that's a community of creators, you can be a part of one, a community of people who are making stuff online, and then community that can go beyond the content itself. So community of just people who are those sit in the pew, come to church type experiences, but who want to have that as the excuse to then go deeper. These are the digital campfires I think about in my theology of digital ministry, where we're creating online content, not for the sake of the content, but for the experiences and the ways it can spark something between us and just give us an excuse to be together in those spaces. But really, what kind of community are people even looking for? That's a big question. You can Google proxemics if you want to learn a whole lot more about this whole theory of community. And I like to think of it about cultivating community and the myth of belonging. We'll talk about that in another video, another time. But ultimately, that hopefully is a helpful way to think about a platform like TikTok, where it doesn't have to just be about followers, but it can really be about community. Now, a couple TikTok stories to tell. My friend Rev Bethany Peerbolt, used to follow her on TikTok. She started on TikTok because some of her high school students, she was a youth pastor at the time, they were just on TikTok. They were just exploring, they were there as people. And in 2020, pandemic life, shut down, they were meeting on Zoom, Bethany and her youth group, and the teenagers started using some phrases that Bethany was like, where did you hear that? Because that's not how we talk about God or theology in our church context. And they're like, oh, on TikTok, we saw some pastors talking. So she started making content on TikTok too, from a progressive faith point of view. And her teenagers engaged it. Turns out a whole lot of people engaged it. Now she is leading an online community, and she's full-time working as a digital pastor for a community called Our Tapestry. She has nearly 300,000 followers on TikTok alone, and then other platforms. But the point being, what started as just a very intentional response to her students in her youth ministry has turned into just a way to not just have followers, but a community that quickly went from TikTok itself to then, hey, can we talk about this book each week on Zoom, to Zoom book studies and Bible studies and pastoral care and, physical in the same space. They call them elbow to elbow gatherings, because you don't want to say in-person gatherings, because we're all in person, even if we're not in the same room together. So that's another rant. The whole point is, what started as a response to pastorally care for her students has developed into a whole community of people who are looking for community and pastoral care and connection. Another example, my friend Rev Timoth on TikTok, he will regularly host live sessions. You can go live on TikTok, where you can just, rather than being bound to, 15, 60 seconds, whatever time frame for the short whatever video, it's just a longer space to be together. Now, that's primarily a one-way conversation. There's ways to bring guests in, like you've seen on Facebook Live and all that kind of stuff, Instagram Live, all kind of a similar experience. But largely, most of the people are watching the video and engaging in the comments. And Timoth is incredible at making it an interactive space. Sometimes he'll be doing something, and he kind of has something going on, and he's just chatting and checking the comments and talking back and forth. But the community that can be developed in those spaces, he calls them a brave space. How do we cultivate a brave space for people to show up who they are as they are, particularly when so many churches impose religious trauma on so many parts of who a person is? So it's just fascinating to see that, yeah, you can have a lot of followers, and that is a nice vanity metric, I suppose. Those are more trends to be aware of, less than a fixation to focus on. But the community aspect of how are you cultivating a community through these spaces? And I hope you're realizing what I'm talking about here translates easily to any aspect of the internet. Okay, TikTok, brief history, and why pastors and churches maybe should think about this thing. Leave a question, comment in all the places, and we'll talk with you on the next one.